Would you like a cookie? Petit beurre. Hello. Welcome to my sketchbook tour. Happy New Year. I hope that the first 8 days have gone well for you. This is going to be my last comic book tour because it's finished and that's it. I'm going to go over the ending and then I'm going to go through the whole thing. This might be very long. So you might want to grab a snack or a drink. We'll start off at the cabin where we left off last time. So she's at the cabin opening gifts. She gets the amulet. We all know that the amulet can take you to different places. So she's back in a box room. It's a different box room this time. Then she's wearing like a Christmas dress. Okay, I thought that this could be a Christmas dress or like a New Year's one or something. So she goes to a room that she's renting and with her stuff, and just, this is literally what's happening with me right now. So living out of like boxes and suitcases and going to cafes when I can, and eating a lot of baked foods. Don't want to see the last page of the comic book, stop watching now. Like, skip this part for a couple minutes because I'm going to explain the last pages. I did 3 possible last pages and I haven't decided which one's going to be. So I have this as the last page, just kind of moving on to the next thing. I have this option, same energy. That cat would not be up there. And then I have this one, which is actually the same illustration as the first page. This one. So at the beginning of the comic book, I would just include this on its own without all this stuff over it. And then the last page would kind of be a mirror of that. Instead of a broken phone screen, though, now my laptop is broken, so I just put a crack in it to show that. I could also do like this one followed by this one, so just like stopping for a break before moving on kind of thing. And I have a version of this that's like not finished, where it's sketched still, and I kind of like the idea of that being the ending because it's kind of still in progress, and I'll show you that here. So that's it. That is actually the exact very last page of the comic book as well. And I'm going to go back to the beginning and we're going to go through the whole thing together, sort of like a year in review. Alright, so we'll start at the beginning. I've been keeping these quotes throughout like the whole year of things that I just kind of liked. I have how many pages each chapter was, and chapter 2 is the largest number of pages with 25. So these are all random quotes. Some of these quotes are from songs. So I'm just keeping these because I think it's cute. So I actually started this in November of 2021, which was a really weird time because, oh, this is Albie. Hey, Albie. So in October, at the end of October, I went on like the first trip I had been on since the pandemic with my family, and it was a really nice trip to the sea in Nova Scotia. It's really nice. After I came back from that trip, things just kind of took like a turn for me. Usually my busy season is November and December, and in 2021 it just didn't happen for like a few reasons. Like partially like I wasn't doing the amount of work that I would normally do to like make that happen, but also it was just slower than usual and I didn't get any commissions in November. I usually get quite a few commissions for Christmas. I did end up getting commissions enough to support me at the end of December and the beginning of January, and I was absolutely fine starting the year. But November and December was like very hard financially and very scary because I didn't really know like or understand what exactly was happening. I just had no money all of a sudden and nothing I did was working. It also stopped teaching yoga, which I was only doing once a week at the time anyway, but it was enough income loss that I felt it. So this was just me dreaming about all the things that I want. And, basic things like wanting to go swimming and, publishing my some of my coloring book, my pandemic book, like trying gouache, which Casey sent me for my birthday that I still have not used. It's on my list for 2023, Casey. Having enough food to feed my cats and the colony cats that I was taking care of at the time. I really wanted to save this one last colony cat we had, who is now adopted, so that worked out. I just wanted things like to go to an A-frame cabin and a ring light for my phone and to finish my comic book. I really wanted some new winter clothes. So yeah, I was just kind of like brainstorming things I wanted at the time. I had a broken screen for like 6 months. I had it fixed, which cost me $300. I was massively overcharged. And then I went home and I dropped it again like 2 weeks later, and I just was like, I didn't want to pay the $300 to get it fixed again, so I just walked around with a broken phone for too long. It was way too long. So I was dealing with cleaning up the mess from 2021 here. And as we went into winter, obviously things just kind of got darker. And then I started drawing this forest because honestly, just would rather be there. I just watched The Rise of Skywalker for the first time in my life. And I loved how peaceful it was when she goes to stay with Luke. And they're just like meditating every day and living in nature. So these forest pages that I drew were one of my favorite things that I drew in this whole comic book for a very long time. I love this one. It's one of my favorites for sure. This little cozy cave with this like glow behind it. I love. And this was kind of like the reality of my life in going into the winter, because like even on a good year, I find the winters hard here. You're kind of isolated. You're kind of on lockdown even before the pandemic because you can do things, but you're limited to what you can do. It's hard to get places. It's very cold. And so, you just naturally stay in a little more. And I usually get depressed in the winter, to be honest, which is not uncommon. So I was drawing like movies that I was watching, which I can't include these for copyright reasons, but I really like this illustration. I don't know about this one. It was supposed to be Harry Potter. Sort of a fail, but I really wanted to color these in, but I just never did. But I kind of like it. And yeah, just doing just like a Star Wars Instagram post. This was before I even had a comic book. I was just drawing. Like, I had no story planned, so it wasn't a story yet. I was just drawing things I was thinking. And yeah, I just kept to the forest theme. And this was kind of like what was going on in my life. Winter can be very peaceful and quiet. Just doing like stuff at home can be really nice. Not a lot of pressure to go out, so that can be nice too. Yeah, living in this forest, there's just the drafting table in the middle of the forest here. Love this illustration of her washing her clothes too in the water. Stuck with the forest theme. Kind of messed this illustration up. I didn't use it, but I like these ones. She got her little coffee there. I'm just like reading in the woods at night, This is how it felt like navigating 2022. I was still doing just random illustrations here. There was no like real story. I was being a pandemic and winter recluse, which is really peaceful. It was really peaceful at the time, and I kind of needed it. Put some Christmas wrapping paper in here. And then I think this was in January, because in January, after the holidays are over, it gets a little bit harder, and this was really tough. I kind of felt like I was becoming really isolated from my friends. Like, I was just finding it harder to see my friends. And so this is how I felt. Like, I was floating alone on an iceberg. So I was like alone floating on an iceberg, and I was like, well, I could be super upset that I'm out here by myself and that it's bleak, or I could keep looking at my past and like what I've left behind, or I could turn towards the future and jump into this ice cold water and like see where it leads, kind of thing. There's this idea that when things get really bad, just like problems come out of nowhere, solutions can also come out of nowhere. And when you think you have like one or two options, there's always a few that you can't see. So thinking like you're stranded alone on an iceberg and the water's too cold to go in, but then she goes in the water and she's fine. She comes up the other side back to the forest. And she finds a key on the ground and goes into a cabin, which we all know the cabin. I'm not going to get into it. The Ukraine war had just started, so this must have been February, and pretty shocking, pretty unexpected. I know it's like normal now, but it will never be normal in my mind that that's happening. It's just so insane that that happened in 2022, and it's still going. I had a little Ukraine symbol to kind of mark in the comic book like when that kind of happened. So yeah, that was a lot of chaos going on at that time also. And so this was her hanging out in the cabin. I think I am going to include these pages. I wasn't going to just because I didn't like any of the illustrations, but I might just do it because it's kind of nice to see them get better throughout the book. I was watching The Witcher and messing up this entire page, so we're not going to use that. And yeah, she gets a letter that shows a map of the island that she's on. She grabs a book about how to live in the forest and just takes off. This is a floor plan of the cabin, and I had to find a way to bring her back to reality, so this was a sketch of how I was going to do that. She just falls through a hole. This reminds me of Super Mario. She just falls through a hole, lands on the ground, back in her kitchen. Not happy about it, okay? Not happy about it. And then we're in chapter 2. Made it through the winter, and it's now April. But January to April were kind of good. Like, a lot of good stuff happened. I got Etsy Star Seller, and I had a really big commission in January, like a huge project that was really great. And I had a commission also from someone I knew to do 6 portraits as Christmas presents. So I was really happy with how things were going. I set up a little heating station on my balcony for stray cats, and stray cats started finding it. I also launched some new stickers, and so it was in February or January I saw a cat using the heating station that looked like an outdoor cat. Like, she looked really healthy, and I just left her alone. I was like, okay, she must be out. She came back a couple weeks later, and I noticed she was not good. Like, she had blood all over her ears, and I was actually on my way to rescue that cat I told you about before. So I had to carry her catnip, cat food, because I was going to go scoop this one cat that lives in the alleyway, Cleo, because I wanted to rescue her. It was like kind of one of my goals for the year. On my way out, I saw Namari, and I kind of like got her into the carrier. She was not very resistant at all. She clearly wanted to be rescued, and then me and my sister took her to the vet that night. She had a really bad mite infestation, fleas, and I kept her with me at my house because I just didn't want her to go to the SPCA and be in a cage. She was really scared. So I just kept her with me at my house. The volunteers, we all kind of put money together to kind of get her initial vet visits. She wasn't chipped, she wasn't vaccinated, she wasn't neutered. My sister ended up adopting her, but before that happened, she bit me on my foot and my sister's face. And we both had to go get treatment for it. It's the first time I've been bitten by a cat like that. And you have to get, if you ever get bitten by a cat, dog, or person, you have to go to the hospital to get antibiotics. Or I got a tetanus shot. I didn't get antibiotics. So yeah, so that was up till April, and then in March I rescued Cleo and took her to the shelter, and she was adopted in December. I also had a really crazy landlord at the time who decided to steal all the cat shelters, and like he started like a war on our cat feeding program that he let run there for like a decade. So I really don't know what the problem was. He just had a problem with me. So I really wanted to move, but I didn't have anywhere to go. We were having a rental crisis. So I was packing my stuff with nowhere to go. I had a neighbor below me who was smoking in her apartment all the time, and I had really bad secondhand smoke in my apartment, so I was just really not having a good time. Me and my other neighbor, were suffering really badly with the smoke, and my landlord he was acting really nuts. But I started practicing yoga again. I injured my neck in December, just like stress injury, like I threw out my neck. And every time I've practiced since then, it just flares it up. So, there's a lot of times throughout the year that I've started practicing and then I stopped again because my neck started hurting. So this was one of those times. And yeah, then we're going through April. April is rough. We get spring in Canada in June. May, June. So it's really long winter, and March and April can be hard because you're like, okay, I'm done. But winter sort of continues. So I was in Japan mentally because they were kind of having their spring. So I just went there in my mind. I also took a vote, and a few people voted for Japan, so I'm like, let's go. And the idea is that it's not actually Japan, it's Japan through the eyes of someone who's never been to Japan. Okay. So I drew this like tea house, and then I watched Japan Sinks. It's like an anime about Japan sinking, so that leaked into my comic book, and it starts to flood. So she hops in a canoe, which is very Canadian, with her little friend, and there you go. This is very, like, this is notes on how this happened. And so we end up in this Black Sea on this kind of like rocky volcanic island, and it's peaceful though. Get smacked by a key. At least we had snacks with us, that's good. And then kind of did some exploring, and this road kind of led to nowhere. It's the same energy as the iceberg. Nowhere really to go, but at least like looking at this beautiful sunset. And then getting rescued by a phoenix. I don't know if it's a phoenix, it's just like a burb that I drew from chapter 1. And from there we go back to the forest. It's a different forest, okay? This forest is just different than the other one. There's food here and a fireplace, and we're hanging out, we're having drinks. We fall asleep on the carpet after eating too much. Wake up with some instructions to go to this room. We find out that it's kind of a room that leads you back to reality, like her boxes are there from packing, and she's like, nope, let's get out of here. Not want that right now. And at this time I was watching a lot of movies, okay? And I was incorporating some of those characters into this. I just thought it was really fun. It would be fun to like explore different outfits and characters. So I actually wrote down who the characters were, what movies they were from. If you can guess, go ahead. This is just like 1950s vintage. That's Rapunzel. It's Harry Styles. This was me when I was traveling, because this is what I just wore, like, I wore those like pants you buy in Thailand a lot, and always my hair was in a bun, and I wore like 50 bracelets. This is just like East Coast version of myself. It rains a lot there. And this was Mamma Mia 2 specifically, 1970s vibe. I think this was also Mamma Mia 2, Bridgerton. And then I watched The Greatest Showman, which I like for some reason loved. Like I've never liked it that much, and then I just loved it when I watched it that one time. And then this is where it gets good. So in the spring in Montreal on my street, there were 1 million lilac trees. Okay, maybe like not 1 million, maybe like 5 or 6. And there was this time, we're in May now, so there was like these lilac trees on my street, and just this like really, really bright full moon. And it was so beautiful, I had to draw it. And this is kind of the energy. It was just like the beginning of spring, and we were all ready for it. And then she finds the amulet in this fountain. There's a little fairy there, and that takes her back to the box room. Yeah, right. So I thought I had gotten an apartment. I kind of had to fight for it quite a bit, and then it had fallen through, and I was kind of back to not having anywhere to go. Like, I had somewhere to go, I had an apartment, but I just really wanted to leave, and it wasn't working out. My downstairs neighbor was also trying to move, and so I just knew that he would be leaving, and I didn't want to be by myself. And then just trying to make the most of being in my apartment, even with my crazy landlord and the secondhand smoke. And then we hit summer. At this point, I just gave up looking for an apartment. I started unpacking my stuff. I'm like, I'm never gonna find anything. Started unpacking my stuff. Going back to my local park. I started going to like local shops that I hadn't been to before. I was trying to like maximize the life that I had instead of trying to get out. And then in June, I wrote that I was drowning. I don't really remember what exactly the problem was here. I was really excited about starting this part of the comic book. So I was kind of in a good place. I did find a dying baby pigeon in an alleyway that I saved, which is kind of traumatic, but If you're me, that stuff is extremely traumatic. I had to bring it home and call the SPCA and keep it overnight. And of course, it didn't make it. It was in really bad shape. I found it next to its already dead mom. Yeah, it was pretty awful. I kind of felt like I was physically drowning at the time, mentally drowning. So I kind of drew this. I think it's just the hopelessness of not being able to get out of my apartment. Like, it's such a weird feeling to just want to be gone from somewhere, and you finally get the courage to, like, okay, I'm gonna leave, and then you just can't. I found that really hard, and I've kind of had that on repeat since I've been in Montreal. So that's kind of how this felt. I was like, just felt like there was no way out. Yeah, we end up here. I started using the paper that Casey gifted me. Thank you so much. This changed, the perspective paper changed my art completely. And then I saw this TikTok of Lake Como, and I was like, let's use that because it's kind of like an Atlantis vibe. Of course, I was watching Stranger Things, and I loved like the 80s summer vibe. As in, like, you don't have any cell phones and you're just going to your friends' houses to hang out. And I just loved like the colors. I also liked this energy of like, okay, well, because I kind of gave up in June, and I was like waiting for, you know, when you get that, like, waiting for someone to help you. Well, it's like, then you have this realization that nobody can really help you. You have to kind of help yourself. So that was kind of what this was. So I was like, gotta fight this thing by myself. And so I did, in the comic book at least. We fought this little demon. It's been following us around, but it's persistent. So we decided to be friends with it. That was like, I was doing a lot of reading on anxiety and recovering anxiety. And it was this idea that, like, you can't hate your anxiety or it won't go away. You have to accept it and learn to live with it, and then it will just shrink down to a more manageable size. So that was that idea. And then again, using the analogies of like jumping and being in water to like be free kind of thing. But she does pass out here, and she does need to be saved by this monster. End up back in the box room, and this time I was actually moving. So this is the end of July. I ended up taking a room. I burned out really badly and I went on leave, so I needed on half my salary to rent a room. I ended up renting a room with someone who actually, she was the girl who took over my yoga classes when I stopped teaching last year. So the room was really nice. It was a big double room. I had my own balcony. Some of you are going to know what comes next, but I was really happy to move. I got a care pack around this time from Kira, and I got a care pack from Casey, so thank you so much. It really helped me. So right before I moved, I started getting cozier with the last colony cat. There was one more colony cat left. It was Cleo's granddaughter, and she had just started showing up on my balcony the week before I moved, so I felt like, okay, maybe we can catch her, because she is extremely feral and difficult to get close to, so that was kind of a win as well. A week to like set up my room, and I moved in with this couple. Okay, I didn't know they were a married couple. I thought they were just together. I didn't think that was that big of a deal, but from the time that I moved in, it was very uncomfortable. The husband wouldn't look at me. Okay, so I was living there, and I would be in the kitchen or the living room or a common space, and he would come in and not acknowledge me. He always had his headphones on, and it was kind of strange. Like, I thought maybe he just like didn't agree to the roommate situation or something. I later found out that they were going through like marital problems, and they ended up separating while I was there, and it was very uncomfortable. So I did a lot of going to parks to get out of that space because it was not very comfortable for me. It was going okay. In October, I was really happy with the seasonal change, really loving Halloween spooky stuff. It was in a really nice neighborhood. It's like a very like upper crust neighborhood near a very fun neighborhood. So I was like going to a lot of places to eat and art shops. Yeah, really cool and really fun excursions there. Soon after I left my own apartment, and my landlord was really nuts. Like, he broke into my apartment after I left, and he stole $150 worth of cat food that I had left for that last remaining cat, because when I signed the lease over, because I did a lease transfer, I gave it to someone who would continue to care for her. That was like my condition, but she just lied and said she would, and then as soon as my landlord stole the food, she said she wanted nothing to do with it. So I knew this cat would have nobody to feed her. It was a really stressful time. We did end up capturing her around this time. Like the whole group kind of banded together. We got one of the neighbors to agree to put a trap out, and we did catch her. So she is in the shelter. I did call the police on him when he did that, and I think the police I spoke to seemed to care about cats. Okay, and they seemed kind of pissed about what he'd done. Whereas when they stole the shelters, I didn't get the same response. They were kind of like, "This isn't that big of a deal." But he returned the food the next day, and I did have to throw away anything that was open because you can't trust it. But I did get the cans and everything back that I could donate and that continue to use. But as my landlord started to disappear, my sister's landlord was also really nuts. He was actually like letting himself into her apartment to do construction jobs and things without telling her. It was really wild. He lived below her. He's really a nut. He has like 12 cases open against him at our tenancy board, but nothing has ever happened to him. She decided to fight him, and it didn't actually go well for her. It was like a really kind of turbulent time. Okay, it was also Halloween, and I was hell-bent on celebrating Halloween. And my sister's trial was actually her second kind of trial against him was on the 31st, and we literally on the 31st, even though we hadn't seen each other in a few weeks, we both got COVID at the same time. So I got COVID in my neighborhood, she got COVID in hers, and we were out for that whole week. So I didn't celebrate Halloween. This is how I started my November. I was just in bed. I was very sick with it too. It was like really, really bad for both of us. Not a good time. And then at this time, my roommate went away. She went to Mexico for 10 days. I had the place to myself. I felt really happy about that because it has been really tense. She also has some political views that I don't really agree with. And there were a lot of rants about like anti-trans and anti-pronouns and stuff. So it was just really uncomfortable being there. And when she came back from her trip, there was a lot of like built up tension, and we ended up getting into a fight. And she took it really far. Like she was screaming all kinds of crazy things at me, and I actually decided to just leave that night. And she asked me to leave at the end of January. I said, I'm just gonna go now because I've had some really horrible living situations over the last few years, and I can't do it. But that's why we're back here at the cabin. I went back here because it's nicer to be away from all the stuff that was happening. And then, we had a nice Christmas, which was good. Fillers I had done to fill in some mistakes. So yeah, we that's it. We went for a swim, kind of like a nice new year, kind of like get rid of the old and come back out with new perspective. And we're staying in temporary accommodation, but gonna make the most of it. I'm going to skip the next few minutes if you don't want to see the end, but that's the idea is, take a pause, reframe things and then move on to better things. It's 4 p.m. now, so I've lost the sun. I'm going to go ahead and close this, but that is a recap of the year. It was a really tough year. Like I didn't really have a good time with 2021, but 2022 was really tough also. And, accommodation was a huge issue for me and still is a huge issue for me. I don't really want to stay in the city anymore. I want to leave. So I'm going to look for something temporary and just try to move on from this. It's been rough for me since I moved here. Accommodation wise, I haven't had a great apartment since I've been here. It's kind of been like one problem after another. So I'm hoping that this year will be the year that I find somewhere that I feel like stable and safe. But we'll see. I hope you're having a good year, and let me know what you think about the endings. Let me know which one you would prefer. And I'll see you in 2 weeks. It won't be a sketchbook tour with this comic book, but I will continue to do sketchbook tours of my illustrations. I also did my first illustration of 2023, which I'll show you. So I don't have my sketchbooks because they're all in my storage unit. I put all my stuff in storage. So I have to get there and get all my art supplies. But I have a little bullet journal here where I just like plan my year. And I did a little reading tracker. And so this ended up being my first illustration of the year. What? Okay, I'm losing light. But I put it as an attachment to the weekly update so you can print it out and use it if you want. The idea is the book titles you read go here. on this little book stack. Okay, and so I'll leave that there for you, and that is the first illustration of 2023. I'm going to be trying all the art supplies I was gifted last year but didn't use because I was so busy with this, and I'm kind of looking forward to that, so stay tuned.